Welcome to Starlight Sci-Fi, the channel where imagination meets the stars. In today's story, we explore the greatest biological mystery in the universe, human longevity. Brace yourselves for shocking revelations as we uncover why even the most advanced alien civilizations fear and admire the stubborn persistence of Earth's most resilient species. The Galactic Council had long prided itself on its vast and meticulous records. Every known species, from the shortest-lived microforms to the oldest sentient civilizations, had been categorized, studied, and neatly placed within the grand tapestry of existence. Their archives spanned thousands of star systems, holding the collected knowledge of ancient empires and lost worlds, and among the many factors studied, lifespan was one of the most critical. Civilizations were often judged by how long their members could survive. The longest-lived races, such as the Vakari, whose rulers often saw the passing of 3 centuries, were considered wise and enduring. The shortest-lived, like the Carthari, who barely reached 30 years, were seen as fleeting but efficient. Every species had its place. Every lifespan had its limit. Then came humans. At first, they seemed ordinary. Early reports classified them as a short-lived species, with an average lifespan of 80 to 100 Earth years. Nothing remarkable, certainly nothing to rival the elder races of the galaxy. They were categorized, filed away, and largely ignored. But then anomalies began to surface. Expedition logs contained mentions of outliers, humans who lived far beyond their expected years. Some reached 150 years, still active and alert. Others spoke of individuals rumored to have walked the Earth for over 2 centuries. There were even whispers of humans who had supposedly survived through multiple historical ages, their existence documented across ancient texts and modern records alike. The Council dismissed these stories as exaggerations or errors in record-keeping. After all, no species could naturally surpass its genetic limits without external intervention. There had to be an explanation. Yet, as time passed, the reports did not fade. Instead, they multiplied. More disturbing cases emerged. Humans who had been declared dead only to recover without explanation. Individuals who had spent decades in isolation without aging significantly. And recorded instances of extreme resilience against diseases, radiation, and even biological decay. The true alarm came when a deep space research vessel recovered a human survivor from a derelict ship. A vessel that had been drifting for nearly 500 years. The being was alive. More than that, he was unchanged. His mind was intact, his body functional. He spoke as if only weeks had passed, unaware of the centuries he had unknowingly endured. His biological scans defied all reason. His cells showed no significant deterioration. Even when compared to records from when he had originally departed Earth, there was virtually no aging at all. That was when the Council could no longer ignore the truth. Something was wrong with humans. Their lifespans were not fixed. Their biological limits were not set in stone. They were an anomaly. And in a universe where order reigned supreme, anomalies were dangerous. Every species in the galaxy had its anomalies, rare genetic outliers who lived slightly longer than the average, sometimes by a few decades. But humans were different. Their anomalies weren't just statistical deviations. They were something else entirely. The first cases to raise concern were scattered but undeniable. There were reports of humans living past 150 years without the aid of advanced medical science. A few reached nearly 200, their bodies still active, their minds still sharp. These individuals weren't artificially enhanced or genetically modified. Their bodies simply refused to break down the way other species did. And then there were the deep sleepers. One of the most infamous cases was discovered beneath the ice of Europa, Jupiter's frozen moon. A human research station had been abandoned centuries ago, its crew assumed lost after a reactor failure. When a salvage team uncovered the remains of the base, they expected nothing more than frozen corpses. What they found instead was a living human. Encased in ice for nearly 300 years, the man's body had been perfectly preserved. More shocking than that, his vitals showed signs of recovery. His heart, which should have ceased function centuries ago, restarted on its own. His frozen tissues warmed. His brain activity resumed, and he awoke. The Council's top xenobiologist studied him for months. The data made no sense. By all known medical science, he should have been dead. No other species could endure such conditions, and yet, somehow, something in human biology had allowed his body to survive an extended state of suspended animation, without technology, without external assistance, purely on its own natural processes. This was not an isolated case. Other stories emerged of humans enduring what should have been fatal events. A woman was pulled from the vacuum of space after drifting for 6 minutes and survived. Another was found deep in the ruins of a collapsed Martian colony, alive and breathing after being buried for 200 years. For some members of the Galactic Council, these reports were cause for celebration. Perhaps humanity had simply evolved a unique form of resilience, an advantage that allowed them to withstand extreme conditions better than others. But for others, these discoveries were terrifying. If these were just the outliers, what did that mean for the future of the species as a whole? Studies on human DNA revealed something even more disturbing. While most species' genetic code showed a gradual deterioration over generations, a slow but inevitable biological expiration date, humans showed signs of something different. Their genetic markers suggested a delayed activation, as if certain traits were lying dormant, waiting for the right trigger. This led to a chilling question. Had humans always been like this, or was something waking up inside them? And if it was, what would happen next? As the Galactic Council dug deeper into the mystery of human longevity, the search led them to Earth's ancient history. Unlike many planets with straightforward evolutionary timelines, Earth's history was riddled with gaps, anomalies, and inexplicable leaps in development. Archaeological records revealed civilizations that had risen and fallen, often leaving behind artifacts that suggested knowledge far beyond their apparent capabilities. In the deserts of Africa, researchers unearthed structures built with metallurgical techniques that should have been centuries beyond the people of that era. In the mountains of South America, they found fossilized remains of humans who had suffered devastating injuries, yet showed evidence of bone regeneration that shouldn't have been possible without advanced medical technology. The Council's scientists pieced together these discoveries, forming a disturbing hypothesis. Humans had been altered. But who or what had done this? And more importantly, why? Clues pointed to a period around 100,000 years ago, a time when early human tribes began to spread across the planet. During this era, humans had undergone what anthropologists termed a great leap forward, a sudden burst in intellectual and cultural development. Art, language, tools, all emerged in rapid succession as if sparked by an unseen force. Further investigation revealed ancient texts and oral traditions speaking of sky beings, entities that descended from the heavens, bringing both chaos and knowledge. The stories varied by region but shared common themes: interaction, manipulation, and the bestowal of gifts and curses. These gifts were not limited to mere knowledge. Biological studies indicated that human DNA contained sequences that had no apparent origin on Earth. Gene clusters involved in cell repair, immunity, and longevity bore signatures of artificial tampering. Such engineering was not unheard of in the galaxy. Many civilizations practiced genetic manipulation, often to eradicate diseases or enhance physical traits. But the subtlety and sophistication of the changes in human DNA suggested a purpose far beyond mere survival enhancement. Records of ancient plagues told another tale. Each time a devastating disease swept through human populations, a small percentage survived and developed enhanced immunity. What should have wiped them out only made them stronger, as though their bodies learned and adapted faster than any other species. There were even legends of entire human communities vanishing, only to reappear generations later, untouched by time. Had they been taken, altered, and returned? Or had they developed the ability to suspend their existence, avoiding the march of time? And then there were the extinction-level events, natural disasters, climate shifts, cosmic impacts. All had threatened humanity's existence. Yet, each time, humans emerged stronger, more adaptable, and more resilient. These catastrophes should have ended their story, but instead they seemed to serve as catalysts for transformation. The Galactic Council now faced a startling possibility. What if humans had been the subject of an experiment, a long-term study in endurance and adaptation? But experiments typically had observers. If humans were being tested, then who was watching them? Evidence mounted that Earth had been visited multiple times in its history by extraterrestrial entities. These visitors had interacted with early humans, possibly altering their evolutionary path. However, none of these visitors had remained. Whether by design or circumstance, the architects of humanity's unique biology had vanished, leaving their work incomplete or perhaps still ongoing. In the end, the Galactic Council was left with more questions than answers. If humans were a product of some ancient experiment, had it been a success or a failure? And as humans began to reach out into the stars, was the experiment still ongoing, with the rest of the galaxy now unwitting participants? One thing was certain. The forgotten experiment that had touched humanity long ago had set them on a path unlike any other species, a path that could lead to unimaginable strength or unforeseen consequences. Among the stars, whispers spread of a terrifying truth: some humans could not be killed. For centuries, the Galactic Council had dismissed such stories as myths, exaggerated by fearful or awestruck observers. Every species had its warriors, its survivors, its so-called legends, who defied death. But when it came to humans, these legends had a disturbing tendency to be real. It began with reports from war-torn regions of the galaxy. Battles that should have eradicated human forces often ended with unexpected survivors. Soldiers found alive in the wreckage of ships obliterated by orbital strikes. Explorers who returned unharmed from radiation-filled wastelands. Some of these individuals had been declared clinically dead, only to return to life with no apparent explanation. One of the most unsettling cases involved a human known only as Subject 17. Captured by an enemy faction during a galactic conflict, Subject 17 had been executed no fewer than 12 times. Each attempt followed a different method. Disintegration beams, atmospheric exposure, even a controlled antimatter detonation. Yet each time the subject's body recovered. Sometimes it took minutes, other times hours or days, but in every case the individual came back. Subject 17 was not alone. A deep space salvage crew discovered the remains of a Terran exploration vessel floating near the event horizon of a black hole. The ship had been lost for over 600 years. The crew was long presumed dead, yet upon retrieval, one human was found alive in a sealed compartment. His body had endured centuries without food, water, or sunlight. Scans showed that his metabolism had slowed to an almost imperceptible level, as if his body had entered a state of suspended time. Even more disturbing were the anomalies appearing within human biology itself. Some individuals displayed rapid cell regeneration at levels unseen in any other known species. In extreme cases, they could recover from what should have been fatal injuries. Severed limbs regrew, vital organs repaired themselves, and even memories lost to neurological damage sometimes returned. The Council's top scientists were divided on the implications of these findings. Was this a rare mutation, appearing in only a handful of outliers? Or was it the beginning of something more? Genetic analysis hinted at something far more troubling. The sequences responsible for these regenerative abilities weren't random mutations, they were dormant genes, remnants of an unknown past. Something, whether nature, evolution, or external interference, had built this into human DNA long ago. But why? And if these abilities were only now beginning to awaken, what else might emerge? The phrase Undying Legion began circulating among the Council's intelligence agencies, referencing the growing list of humans who seemed to exist outside the natural limits of mortality. The implications were staggering. If humanity was on the brink of transcending death, then what role would they play in the future of the universe? Would they become its protectors? Or would they become something the galaxy was never meant to withstand? For all the stories of unkillable humans, there were others just as strange stories of those who disappeared without a trace. Throughout history, countless humans had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. Entire expeditions, research stations, and even colonies had simply vanished. No wreckage, no distress signals, no remains. It was as if they had been plucked from existence. At first, the Galactic Council dismissed these cases as accidents, ships lost to spatial anomalies, colonies wiped out by planetary disasters, the natural hazards of an unpredictable universe. But the pattern was too precise. These disappearances happened too often, and more disturbingly, they often involved individuals already identified as genetic anomalies. Then came the reappearances. On a desolate moon orbiting a dying star, a long-lost human vessel was discovered. It had vanished 800 years earlier. The crew's logs indicated that only a few weeks had passed since their last recorded entry. To them, no time had been lost. Their bodies showed no signs of aging, their memories were intact, and their technology was centuries behind what humanity had since developed. This was not an isolated case. Another group of humans, missing for over 1,000 years, was found on an abandoned space station drifting beyond the galactic rim. Their minds were untouched, their bodies unchanged. They spoke of strange lights, distorted time, and a force that had taken them only to return them later, as if it had studied them and lost interest. The disappearances spanned thousands of years. Some had been lost for centuries, others only for days, but no one returned unchanged. Medical examinations revealed something chilling: their DNA was different. Tiny but precise alterations had been made to their genetic structure. Repairs had been made to broken or damaged sequences, aging processes seemed slowed or halted, and in some cases, entirely new gene patterns had been introduced, patterns that matched no known evolutionary process. This left the Council with a terrifying possibility. Something was taking them, something was modifying them, and then returning them. But why? Some theorized that humanity's ancient experimenters, the ones responsible for their anomalous biology, had never truly left. They were still watching, still testing, still shaping. Perhaps these disappearances were not accidents but part of some long-term experiment. Others feared something worse. What if this wasn't a natural process or a forgotten experiment at all? What if humans were being taken because they were nearing a threshold, some point of change that the Watchers either feared or needed to guide? And the most disturbing question of all, if some had been returned, how many had not? The disappearances continued. Each year, more humans went missing. Was this the next stage of their evolution? Or was it the prelude to something the galaxy was not ready for? The Galactic Council had always prided itself on controlling the known universe, ensuring order among its many species. But humans had become an enigma, a variable that refused to be understood, let alone controlled. The scattered anomalies, those who survived impossible conditions, those who lived beyond their natural limits, those who vanished and returned, were no longer isolated cases. Reports indicated that their numbers were growing. At first, the changes were subtle. A human colony on the fringes of Council space reported an outbreak of a deadly virus. The infection should have wiped them out. Instead, the survivors showed inexplicable immunity. When their blood was studied, it was found to contain an unknown protein, one that hadn't been there before. Elsewhere, a mining accident left an entire human crew buried under tons of rock and metal. Rescue teams arrived weeks later, expecting to find corpses. Instead, they found the miners alive, their bodies having sustained themselves in complete darkness without food, water, or air. The implications were staggering. Something inside the human genome was activating. Some believed that human evolution was simply accelerating, pushed forward by their harsh environments and constant struggles. But the more the Council studied it, the more they realized that this was not natural evolution. Evolution was slow, random, and unpredictable. This was precise. A switch had been flipped. A program had begun to run. The most chilling confirmation came when a group of human researchers studying deep space anomalies suddenly ceased all communication. When a Council ship was sent to investigate, they found the station abandoned except for one human. She stood in the center of the station, staring into nothing, her body suspended in a state between life and death. When medical teams attempted to revive her, she woke without fear, without confusion. She only spoke 3 words. It has begun. She was taken for study, but no matter what tests were run, her body resisted analysis. Her cells repaired damage instantly, her brain showed activity beyond measurable limits, and her mind seemed linked to something unseen. She was the first, but not the last. Across the galaxy, humans began reporting strange experiences, visions of places they had never been, sensations of forces they could not explain. Some developed heightened awareness, able to predict events before they happened. Others displayed physical resilience beyond any known limit. The Council could no longer deny it. Humans were changing. And whatever force had been guiding them, whether an ancient experiment, a forgotten species, or something far older than the Council itself, had finally awakened. The question now was not whether humans would outlive the other races. The question was, what were they becoming? The Galactic Council had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Some burned brightly, expanding across the stars only to collapse under their own weight. Others stagnated, reaching their peak and fading into irrelevance. But humans were something else entirely. Their survival had defied logic. Their endurance had surpassed expectation. And now their transformation was accelerating. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Humans were no longer just living longer, they were becoming ageless. The oldest recorded humans, some over 300 years old, showed no signs of deterioration. Their cells no longer degraded with time, and their minds remained sharp, untouched by the mental decline seen in every other species. Even death itself was losing its hold on them. An incident on the Outer Rim confirmed the Council's worst fears. A human ship had been ambushed by an unknown hostile species. The entire crew had been killed, their bodies left floating in space. When a recovery team arrived days later, the bodies were gone. No distress beacon had been activated. No survivors had been detected, yet weeks later, the same crew was found alive on a distant colony, showing no memory of their deaths. Some Council members argued that these were isolated events, that not all humans were changing. But deep scans of human DNA told a different story. The shift was already happening, even in those who showed no outward signs. The genetic markers that had puzzled scientists for centuries, the dormant sequences, the unexplained resilience, were no longer dormant. They were activating in every living human, slowly but inevitably rewriting what it meant to be part of their species. And the change wasn't just physical. Across the galaxy, humans began speaking of dreams, vivid visions of distant stars, of unknown civilizations, of something vast and ancient calling to them. The patterns of their dreams matched those recorded by the lost ones, those who had vanished and returned, altered in ways no one understood. The Council feared what this meant. If humans were truly awakening to something greater, something beyond their control, then the balance of power in the galaxy would shift. It wouldn't happen in a sudden war or invasion, it would happen in silence, as humanity evolved into something unrecognizable. The council debated what to do. Some proposed containment, isolation, keeping humans away from the rest of the galaxy to prevent the spread of whatever force was driving them forward. Others suggested intervention, to study and manipulate the process before it reached its full potential. But deep down, they all knew the truth. There was no stopping this. Whatever had been set in motion had begun long before any of them existed. Perhaps it had been an experiment, a forgotten manipulation by a long-extinct race. Or perhaps it was something even older, a design woven into the fabric of the universe itself. And as humanity continued its relentless march forward, the other species of the galaxy were left with a single, terrifying realization. The age of mortals was ending, and the age of humans had begun. That's it for today's episode of Starlight Sci-Fi. If you enjoyed this deep dive into humanity's strangest biological mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. What do you think? Could humans one day become an undying species? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep looking to the stars.